chat, and then we'll address your questions throughout or at the end. All right, Doug, are you ready?
Great, I'm ready.
Okay, take it away.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I hope you get to take advantage of the information presented here. Deciding to start a nonprofit organization is a big decision, and I hope there's some tips that you'll be able to use in your journey. My background personally, I'm the retired CEO of the Akron area YMCA. I was there for 25 years. As I like to tell people, my parents dropped me off at the YMCA on the east side of Cleveland when I was 10 and then never came back to pick me up. I just stayed forever and made a career out of it. So I'm one of those odd young people who decided what I wanted to do when I was about 14 years old and made a career out of it. We had some considerable success with the Akron area YMCA. The Akron area YMCA was not doing well in 1991. It was struggling, coming out of tough economic times. And so we were able to grow and raise considerable amount of capital for projects and $5 million in annual giving during my tenure there. I had a couple of honors. I was honored to be able to serve as the national board chair of the Association of YMCA Professionals, which is a large organization that represents the some 2,500 YMCAs in the United States. And then I serve on many local boards, including the Rotary Foundation, the Akron Symphony Orchestra, and the Well Community Development Corporation. A ton of experience, love to share it with you. So the main topics we're going to talk about today is just an introduction to SCORE and what is a nonprofit, how to govern, manage, finance, and set up, and then next steps. The introduction to SCORE. Our mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. We are affiliated with the Small Business Administration out of Washington, D.C. And our vision is that every person has the opportunity or has the support necessary to thrive as a small business owner. Our counselors are experienced men and women dedicated to giving back to the community for the success they enjoyed during their careers. SCORE is the Service Corps of Retired Executives, if that wasn't clear. Over 45,000 clients have benefited from SCORE services. And we offer free and confidential one-on-one counseling, plus a variety of workshops like the one you're participating in today. To schedule a meeting with a local SCORE counselor, submit a request online at the website or call the office at this number. And again, Laura said that we'll be sharing this PowerPoint presentation, so don't worry about scribbling notes if you don't. What is a nonprofit? Well, a nonprofit organization is an organization that's founded to further a public cause. It's a group organized for purposes other than generating profit and in which no part of the organization's income is distributed to its members, directors, or officers. The nonprofit community is significant when it comes to economic power in your community. 12.3 million employees in the United States, 64 million board members and volunteers, 10 plus million donors, and that equals a lot of people who care. One of my little ahas that I like to share early on in the presentation, that nonprofit is a tax status, not a business plan. So one of the first things I do when I work with a client is start to develop the mission and vision of the organization, but also use a couple of different templates to develop a business plan. A not-for-profit business is a business. It's they go out of business frequently in Northeast Ohio, and new ones are founded every day. And just in Summit County here in Ohio, There are over 2,500 not-for-profit organizations. Now that includes places of worship, so religious organizations, schools, hospitals. We'll get into that in a little bit. But please approach the nonprofit as a business you're trying to plan with excellence at the top of your agenda. Nonprofits are where Americans come together to solve problems. They're promoters of civic engagement. Nonprofits are building blocks of democracy. They're part of making decisions in the community. They're really laboratories where people learn leadership. It's not unusual for a person to get involved as a volunteer with one organization, move through different leadership responsibilities, and then take on a larger leadership role with a different organization. Nonprofits are economic engines and should be viewed that way. There's a good chance you or a family member have engaged with other nonprofits, whether it's a hospital, whether it's medicine-related fundraising, developing skills in youth organizations like Little League or 4-H. You probably know someone who attended a not-for-profit preschool, grade school, high school, or institution of higher education. So you can see through this little grid here, whether it's zoos or whether it's your local parks and recreation district. Maybe you learned to swim through the JCC or the YMCA or a scout camp. All these organizations are very integral to what happens in your community. Some common types of nonprofits are listed here. Charitable organizations, social advocacy groups, hospitals, educational institutions, as we just talked, and on down this list, including fraternal societies, whether it's Alpha Phi Alpha or other fraternities in your community, trade and professional associations are also part of this network. So the Association of Dentists, there's a statewide trade association of dentists who advocate for what's important in their work to elected officials in the state of Ohio. So all these kinds of organizations exist. They're all nonprofits. Nonprofit charities to be considered for 501c3 status by the IRS. This is that tax status I referred to. Your enterprise must fall into 4 general categories. So if you're considering it, consider which of these 4 general categories your organization might fall into. So education, health, religion, and community benefit. The community benefit bullet is very broad and can involve anything from helping out. One of my clients is rescuing feral cats. And so it could be something for pets and animals, or it could be a hospital or a free health clinic. It could be a tutoring program that you're doing through a church. These are all legitimate not-for-profit organizations, but they must fall into these 4 general, one of these 4 general categories. Something that I preach every time I talk with someone about a not-for-profit is you've got to balance your mission and your margin. These are your M&Ms. Mission is always the most important thing that you have to pay attention to as a not-for-profit leader. Because if you have no mission, you will never have any margin on the bottom line to be able to do your good work. And mission is always greater than margin. If trying to make money drives your nonprofit, you're doing it for the wrong reason. And you probably should select doing a for-profit organization, which in many ways is easier than doing a not-for-profit. We'll get into that in a little bit. The IRS requirements, when you make your application, they're going to want you to have a powerful mission statement. They're going to know that you're picking the right team, that your governing board, usually there's one staff person right at the beginning, that you're going to plan everything from your program delivery and activities to adding up the costs, your financial situation. So you've got to get your state status with federal status with the IRS, 501c3, and then the not-for-profit status with the state of Ohio according to the state of Ohio revised code. And then it gets back to writing an effective business plan. And again, a SCORE mentor can give you a number of templates so you don't have to start from square one. So not-for-profit charities, designated as 501c3 organizations, a public charity. Example would be the Akron Canton Regional Food Bank, Goodwill Industries, Summit County Historical Society. And then there are public foundations like the Akron Community Foundation, the GAR Foundation, the Corbin Foundation, the Knight Foundation. These three here are about the biggest ones in Summit County. I'm forgetting, the Morgan Foundation in Hudson. These are some of the bigger foundations in Summit County. For-profits. So what's the difference? And this is one of the first questions I ask a potential client when we talk. Why are you choosing nonprofit versus for-profit? So a for-profit produces, markets, and sells goods and services to make money for owners and investors. Nonprofits produce, market, and sell products or services to improve the community. That's where the mission comes in. We're trying to address an important issue in the community and improve the community for the whole. Characteristics of a for-profit business: it's privately or publicly, including stock, owned. Income and profit benefits the owners, as we mentioned. It's governed by the owners, and it may be bought and sold with profits or sale going to the owners. It's different from a not-for-profit. So a not-for-profit has community ownership. There's no private industry interest, no stock, and no one can personally benefit from the earnings, whether it's board members or employees or volunteers. Income greater than expenses, your surplus, commonly called surplus, must go back into the nonprofit organization to build the asset base. You are governed by a board of trustees and director, as opposed to an owner of the business. The board of trustees is the owner of the organization, and it can never be sold for a profit. The organization goes out of business, the assets must go to another nonprofit. I would use an example of the YMCA in Barberton, Ohio. When that was built, we built into the agreement that if the Y ever went out of business 50 years from now, the assets would revert back to the city, which qualifies as another not-for-profit organization. So you're going to need to decide, will I be a for-profit or will I be a nonprofit? Define your reasons for the decision. The wrong reason is a primary reason to start a nonprofit is to raise or obtain money. There are too many not-for-profits who start for this reason, where somebody says, well, this would be a way for me to make a living. That's the wrong reason. The right reason is to better the community and do great things to make your community a better place for children, families, and adults. So incorporate as a not-for-profit only if you intend to rely on donations, government funding, and or foundation grants. This can't be all of your funding, but if you want to access those funding sources, it's a chore. It's a difficult task to develop relationships with these funding sources. Very rewarding, especially if you have a compelling mission. Nonprofit advantages, everybody kind of reverts to the tax exemption. Nonprofits do not pay federal taxes or real estate taxes. There are the deductibility of donations. However, research shows that vast majority of donors don't give because of the tax deduction. They give because they believe in your mission. and what you're doing in the community. The tax advantage is a bonus, but it's not the primary reason why people donate to not-for-profits. You'll also have accessibility to grants, but recognize that 85% of all charitable giving in the United States in recent years comes from individuals and not from corporations and foundations. As wealth transfers in today's world, I think that balance will shift, and it's probably even today closer to 75 to 80% from individuals, and 25%, 20 to 25% from foundations, especially as corporations become multinational and not as locally connected. It's a little tougher to get larger gifts from corporations in today's environment. But grant accessibility is there, and there are some lower personnel costs because you're involving volunteers in what you're doing to achieve your mission. But again, saving money shouldn't be the primary motivation. Not-for-profits do pay some taxes, and this is something that as you make your case in the community, there are local assessments like, taxes for water, street cleaning, et cetera. Non-for-profits do pay Social Security taxes and Medicare taxes, workers' comp taxes, unemployment. All these things are going to, as your organization grows, are going to have to be incorporated into your business plan. Nonprofit disadvantages. You as the founder may have a loss of personal control because according to the State of Ohio Revised Code, the owner is the board, not the founder. And so you must be purpose-driven, mission, no unrelated activities. Lobbying activities are limited, but not prohibited. You should make contact with your local elected officials to let them know what you're doing and what you intend, and see if there's any help that can be derived from government connections. So don't hesitate to stay in touch with your local elected officials. You're going to have to get an occupancy permit. That's maybe way down the road for you if you have a building, but I just dealt with a client the other day who has her eye on an old church that she would like to repurpose for her not-for-profit organization. So you're going to have to become familiar with your local regulations regarding building, zoning, facilities, that your facility is going to have to meet regulations. More of another organization that repurposed a church and wanted to do a food bank of sorts. And they had to raise a significant amount of money, over 6 figures, to renovate the old church kitchen to meet current state licensing. So you take all these things into consideration. This is one of my favorite myths. Nonprofits may not make money. The fact is, nonprofits not only can, but should make a profit. In the not-for-profit world, we don't call it profit, we call it a surplus income or contributory income. But by any other name, it's excess revenue over expense. But that surplus, that profit that's built into your business plan, must go back into building the assets of the organization. So it could be building and grounds, it could be paying your employees better as your organization grows. So surplus income allows the not-for-profit organization to operate effectively and reinvest in their services. Surplus income allows the not-for-profit to invest in opportunities as well. So part 3 of the presentation is governing a nonprofit organization. We talked a little bit about the board of trustees, or commonly called a board of directors. The board represents the community. I love the term a board of trustees, because it states that this group of people holds in trust the organization's assets for the larger community. The board has ultimate responsibility, according to the State of Ohio Revised Code. The board is the owner. The board's 4 big responsibilities are planning, policy creation, and funding. They're also responsible for evaluating the performance of the top staff person. May just be one person, but that board should at least annually pull back and say, how are we doing? And how can we give coaching to our leader to take us to the next step? The board of directors and trustees, according to the state of Ohio, there must be at least 3 directors, but there should be enough to do the work of the board and enough for productive debate and decision making. Your board, in a way, is a focus group. The executive director, whoever's paying attention full-time or even part-time to the mission of the organization, uses the board to vet ideas, and that's where the board of directors makes policy. And so they set the sidelines as we're heading towards the goal. We want our organization to stay within these sidelines as we head towards the goal. So they are setting policy and doing strategic planning to help the staff, whether it's one person or a whole bunch of people, to make decisions. The number also dictates what phase you're in. If you're in a fundraising stage, you may want to have more people on your board. When you're not in a fundraising stage, you could reduce your board from 21 members to 12 members. It just form follows function, to quote Frank Lloyd Wright, and it applies to not-for-profit organizations as well. Avoid relatives and friends unless they can really contribute specific expertise. It's always difficult. When things are going well, it's okay to have friends and family involved, but occasionally when it comes time for a tough decision, it's not good to have a board filled with family members and friends. You need people who can really help you achieve your goals. Term limits for members of the board. It's almost been 20 years, more than 20 years now, since laws were passed encouraging not-for-profits to have term limits, stagger your terms, elect people for 2 or 3 year terms, and have them serve 2 or 3 consecutive terms. It's always good to have rollover. If you have the same people giving the same advice for 20 years, that's not healthy for your not-for-profit organization. Expectations of good board members: they're committed to the mission. That's number 1. Not just somebody you're trying to pull in and they want to serve. It's really, really important that they have some commitment to your mission. They love what you do and want to make a difference. They're willing to give time. I like these little the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. Easy little phrases to remember. But I also like the 3 D's. Every board member should be a donor, a doer, and a door opener. And that's what can be really important and will lead the way when it comes to successful operations and successful fundraising. You're able to advocate for others. They have community contacts. Networking is so very important for your board to have contacts in the community. Have a particular expertise to share, like accounting, marketing, construction. One of the things that I advise startup nonprofits is if you can find someone with a legal background, especially when you're trying to get started, who's willing to donate their time, because you're probably not going to have much capital right at the beginning. That kind of expertise is irreplaceable, and accounting is right up there with legal. They should be willing to learn, and they should be willing to contribute and raise money. If they aren't willing to contribute and raise money, Maybe there's another place they can serve in your organization, but not on the board of directors and board of trustees. Selecting board members. So here's some general principles. Board members are going to make the rules, so pick them carefully. Use a group of people that puts their heads together, determines what your needs are, and makes a list of here's some people, here's some contacts that I know. These people would be a great asset. We're trying to do something in the area of education. Local school principal, a school board member might be a great person to have on your board. The executive director cannot get rid of the board. Only the board can hire and fire board members. The executive director can make recommendations. If someone's not attending meetings and they aren't contributing and they're not up to speed on what's going on with the organization, board members can be fired, but you should engage the board in that process. Frequently, it's a very difficult and emotional time, but you should be actively keeping board members involved and asking them to move on to a new task if they just can't make the time and the commitment to serve and help you with your organization. Every board that I'm aware of now signs a conflict of interest form annually. It's not that you can't have someone on your board who may have a conflict of interest, but you have to disclose that potential conflict of interest. And maybe, let's say, if you're putting an addition on a building or you're trying to build your first building, and you have someone from a construction company on your board, they should recuse themselves from any votes, or just say, I'm not going to accept any proposals from the organization because I have this conflict of interest voting for who's going to do it, having a seat on the board. And then have an orientation plan. A couple of boards that I'm involved with, we not only have an orientation for new board members, but we invite the whole board to the meeting because board members frequently aren't thinking about your organization every day. And it's helpful to refresh people on mission, vision, and values and goals of the organization. Choose people who can contribute the expertise. We talked about this a couple slides ago, and they're listed here: marketing, communication, for-profit, not-for-profit, mentors and advisors, involved community volunteers. All can play an important role in what you're trying to do. The state of Ohio, you have to have at least 3 officers when you start. It could be a president, vice president, and secretary. The secretary is who signs your legal documents. Frequently, people will use a president, treasurer, and a secretary. The treasurer will frequently chair your finance committee. And we start talking about committees on this slide. Typically, there are governance committees like the finance committee, and in small organizations, finance and audit can be the same group. Planning and evaluation, the nominating committee, or more commonly called in today's language, the board development. We're looking at all board development, not just nominating. Operating committees like marketing communications, a program committee. This is your development, this is your fundraising and donor stewardship committee, and then a personnel committee. If you have more than one staff person, you're going to have to build your organization and have people monitoring what you're doing and how you're supervising and evaluating employees. Ad hoc committees are committees that are as needed. Let's say your city of Akron is celebrating their 200th anniversary next year. There's a 200th anniversary committee that it has a definite ending time. When it's all over, it will disband. They are not an ongoing committee. but they are an ad hoc committee. They have a specific goal and a specific end date for their work. The role of boards and members. So you should have a job description for your board members. When you're talking with someone about the potential of serving on the board, whether it's you or one of your board members, you should have a service description, as some people call it, by any other means or name. It's a job description. Here's what your responsibilities are. Their responsibilities should be clearly defined in your bylaws. Another helpful thing to involve an attorney in is you're going to have to create a set of bylaws for the state. Define the duties of each officer in the bylaws, and everyone should expect to attend an orientation. So meetings, many boards meet 4 times a year. And yet, but if you meet 4 times a year, then your committees can conveniently meet in the months between your board meetings. The organization that I worked for, we scheduled a monthly board meeting, but recognizing that we would meet at least 10 times a year and that we would not meet if there is no business to discuss, respecting everyone's busy schedules and their time availability. And back to the founding executive director, the person who founds the organization, or maybe you are taking over as a new executive director of an already existing organization. Again, beat this drum, but the executive director answers to the board. It's not your organization. You're guiding it at the directive of your board of directors for the good of the community. The Akron Area YMCA was founded in 1870. I was the 12th executive director and CEO. So there were lots of people before me. I inherited an already mature organization. And so it was never my expectation that I was the owner, quote unquote, which you can't really be, of the YMCA. I answered to the board. They hired me. I report to them. They usually do not serve on the board, as I just described, and they cannot vote. The exception is the red asterisk there. Frequently, founding executive directors are on their board, but as the organization matures, they will roll off and not have that conflict of interest. Foundations, grant makers will look for what comprises your board, and if there are family members, that's a bit of a red flag, and they're going to ask you about it. So the executive director conducts or supervises all daily agency operations, develops personnel manual, hires and fires all the employee. The only employee of a not-for-profit that reports to a group should be the executive director. Everyone else should have there should be an organization chart, irrespective of how large your organization is, that handles all the personnel issues. Managing the not-for-profit, hiring great employees with job descriptions, a salary schedule and plan. That's the goal of all of us, right? I mean, we're always looking for excellent people, the best people that we can possibly have to help us achieve our goals. I love this phrase here in blue. The only thing worse than training an employee and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. If you can't afford training for your employees, host it and invite other people. Find local leadership to train your employees, whether it's customer service, how they do their job, or childcare, early childhood education. For the YMCA day camp, resident camp training, all those kinds of things. You can't afford not to have your staff trained. And then motivate and lead great employees. Pass on the passion and the dreams. Managed by wandering around. A desk is a horrible place from which to observe the world. And so be there, be present as your programs operate, so you know what's going on in your organization. Policies, you should have a file of all policies. There are many great computer programs. We don't need file cabinets full of paper files anymore, but we have to have those policies on file that are established by the board. As the fourth bullet point there says, the title of the position of the person responsible for implementation of that policy should always be attached. And then also make sure, it always frustrates me, when I see a policy and it has no date on it, and we don't know the last time it was updated or reviewed. Typically, even your bylaws should be reviewed at least every couple of years by your governance group. It could be the executive committee of your board, or it could be a separate committee, but that's related to governance of the organization. So just make sure you're not tucking away those policies and never looking at them again. Finances, the organization must be separate. Organization money must be separate from any personal money. I see this happen with smaller organizations occasionally, and it presents problems. Take your accounting seriously. Checking and savings accounts must be organizational accounts, not personal. The finance committee of the board should oversee the organization's finances, should know what is going on, and have solid reports that they can trust from the staff, if the staff is large enough to have a separate finance director. The executive director and CEO or other staff prepare the budgets, and then volunteers review them and approve what happens in those budgets. Budget is your operation plan for the year expressed in dollars. It's not just about the dollars, it's what you intend to do operationally and what it's probably going to cost. It's a good guideline to follow, set your plans for the coming year. So the budget is your operations plan for the year expressed in dollars. Your operations plan can also be expressed in other ways through your strategic plan, etc. But this is probably one of the most basic things for your organization. It's the board's opportunity to say, are we on plan or are we deviating from the plan? Keep written minutes of all finance meetings. The organization must operate within the budget. It's not unheard of for not-for-profit organizations to get audited by the government. So you want to make sure that all of these documents are in order and that you're doing what you say you promised to do in the community. The board approves everything contained in the budget. Major changes outside that scope need board approval. As long as the director stays inside the scope of the budget, it's already been approved by your board, and you should be able to execute your plan accordingly. So in case you were wondering what kind of things might pop up in your not-for-profit organization's budget, employee costs inevitably are 50% or more of your expenses. Occupancy costs, whether it's rent, lease, or if you own your building, heat, light, electricity, insurance, and legal, if you have the resources to be able to hire a legal advisor for those times when you might need it. It's got to be in your budget. Public relations, marketing, communications, accounting. Numerous not-for-profit organizations in today's environment are hiring accounting firms to be their chief financial officer. not-for-profits right now are having a difficult time finding full-time finance directors, but if you use an accounting firm, they can help you get your important reports done on a monthly basis. And then programming and operations, and of course, fundraising costs. There is a cost to raising money. When financing the not-for-profit organization, you need to determine what the four-legged stool is for your organization. So we all know that a four-legged stool is pretty sturdy and stable, right? If you have four sources of income for your organization, it's a good thing. To have a three-legged stool is fine. It's pretty sturdy, but a two-legged stool wobbles and a one-legged stool is even worse. So you can't have all your eggs in one basket. You can't have all your revenue coming from only one source. It's best to find sources for your organization where revenue can come from different places. Discover your sustainable income model. That's what funders want to see. They don't want to give a gift to an organization that may not exist 2 years from now or next year. Funders want to know that you are a sustainable organization and that you have a sustainable income model. It might include these 5 bullet points: earned income, fees for services. For a theater, it might be education classes in addition to ticket sales. The donated income from individuals, estates and bequests, foundation grants, corporate contracts. You have early childhood education and you have an employer who needs that service for their staff, their team members, and you might have a contract with a business to provide that, or corporate wellness programs, etc. Government income, contracts, Title 20 for early childhood education and other grants. If you're doing programs for ex-offenders, or if you're doing work preparedness, work readiness programs, there are contracts out there from the government that will help you jumpstart your programs in those areas. Alternative schools, those are other types of government income. Housing. Other donated income, crowdfunding, special events, in-kind donations. There's a group called Middlebury Housing on the east side of Akron right now that gets incredible in-kind donations from organizations like Lowe's and Home Depot. So those kinds of in-kind services can be invaluable. Revenue sources, I alluded to this earlier. The entire nonprofit sector earns more than 80% of its revenue via private fees and services for performing grants and contracts. However, each individual nonprofit has its own revenue mix. There is no standard one-size-fits-all. There's a phrase I like to use. It's, if you've seen one nonprofit, you've seen one nonprofit. They're as different as snowflakes. This statement here comes from the National Council of Nonprofits. It's a little bit dated. It's becoming almost 5 years old, but it's still representative of what's going on today in the marketplace. Fees charged to people who receive the benefit of your programs and services is still one of the best ways to sustain your organization. Donations, you must be designated as a charity. You must register with the Ohio Attorney General, and you may be required to register with the city or county, depending on what you're doing for business. There are designated restricted donations. So if a person wants to dedicate a specific donation to your literacy program of your organization, then that is a restricted donation. It has to be used for that. It can't be used for other parts of the organization. And then there's undesignated, unrestricted donations, just a general, I love this organization. I want to make a contribution. Use it to the best of your ability keep the organization healthy. Estimate the annual amount of donations you will expect from individuals when you're planning this process. A good nonprofit has a development plan that estimates where they're planning their donations to come from. Nonprofits should not be having a conversation with donors about how little they are spending. They should instead be speaking to them about how much impact they're having relative to their budget. I love this quote from the book, The Rise and Fall of Charities in the 21st Century. So many times we think, well, we have to just live without spending any money, when if you spend money, you may make money. You're going to have impact. There's a balance between what you have available to you in resources and how much impact you're having relative to their budget. You've seen there's been a trend over the past couple of decades that not-for-profit organizations' annual reports have evolved into community impact reports. That is a specific effort to share, here's what we're doing in the community, here's how we're changing lives. All donations, however, should be acknowledged in writing. You should have a plan for being able to do that in a timely basis. Do that quarterly. You get to come within days of receiving a contribution. Some sort of communication should go out to that donor, letting them know how important that donation was and how important they are to the organization. Donations greater than $250 have to be acknowledged by a letter stating that nothing was given or received in exchange for the donation. If you would go to the Akron Symphony Orchestra's gala in April, your whole donation isn't what you spend on that gala. You have to subtract what the cost of the dinner was, and the rest of it is your donation to the organization. So that's where this statement, nothing was given or received in exchange for the donation, comes into play. Foundation grants. No organization can be run solely on foundation grants. One of my big challenges when I deal with a new client through SCORE is that people don't know where their revenue is going to come from. And they think if they just achieve their 501c3 status, their tax exempt status, that some sort of magic spigot will open up and that foundations will just donate to my worthy cause that I think is worthy. And maybe nobody else does, or a limited scope of people who really share in their passion for the mission. So if you think all of your organization resources are going to come just from foundation grants because you became a 501c3 organization, that's simply not true. Many times foundations will give a one-time contribution and you can't count on them for future years. You can't count on renewals with foundation grants, but you have to have the conversation with them. You have to keep the conversation going. You'll always have a written proposal, a grant, usually in a format developed by the foundation. Rule number one with foundation grants, do what they ask. If they ask for a 2-page proposal, don't give a 6-page proposal just because you want to explain more about your organization. Request a meeting with someone before you submit the application for a grant, just to get a feel and to make a human connection and get a feel for what they will support and for at what level they'll support your organization. Most often, a written report to the foundation is going to be required. You have to report the outcomes and the from-to numbers. So we went from serving 100 people to 250 people. Those are the numbers that foundations want to learn about. Proposal rating. Roughly 20% of foundation proposals is the success rate, but it can be higher if you do your research. Don't just send out a proposal because you heard that the GAR Foundation is accepting grants, you have to do your research to help raise your success level. If you're writing a report for one cause and another cause is what the foundation is interested in, your chances of getting that grant are slim. So make sure you do your research, know what the foundation is fond of. I mentioned the Burt Morgan Foundation. They are very much into entrepreneurship, not so much other types of programs. So you need to know what the causes of the foundation and your funding source are. PNC Bank is really into early childhood education. And if you look up their website, you'll find the things that they're passionate about. But make that contact with your local PNC Bank or any bank, whether it's Huntington or Key or any bank. Make those contacts. You've got to do the legwork. You can't observe the world from sitting behind the desk. And the last bullet point here, follow up, is so important when it comes to seeking donations. Many years ago, probably 40 years ago, I attended a workshop with this legendary fundraiser, Hank Rosso. I always remembered Hank's rule of 7, and it's thank people 7 times in different ways. Shoot them an email, shoot them a text message, shoot them a handwritten note. Make sure they receive a community impact report. Make sure you're touching people, making what you don't want is 6 months from now somebody to say, what'd you ever do with my contribution? You want to have a plan to stay in touch with those. Foundations, again, can be local, they can be national. I have somebody that I work with that discovered a group out of San Francisco that was into low-income housing, and that was their cause for celebration. And so this organization, a local organization, received a national grant from this group, and it has become a valuable resource. So if you know someone has passion for a cause that you're advocating for, sure, reach out and make that connection. But most giving happens locally. How to find foundations. This is a resource that not too many people know about. Foundation Center has a physical office up in the Hanna building in Cleveland, which is, if you're not familiar with Cleveland, is the Playhouse Square neighborhood there. And so few people use them that the staff who staff this office are so interested. They'll dive in and help you research what your cause is and who might support it. But the Foundation Center also has a database that's accessible through local libraries. So both those, but it's well worth a trip to Cleveland to talk with somebody who has this expertise. So the librarian staff in Playhouse Square would love for you to go visit. Sources of Foundation 990 reports. You can find out what a foundation is passionate about. If you access if they're a not-for-profit charity foundation, their 990 can be accessed online. It's public information. So you can either go through the Foundation Center, or you can go, there's an organization called guidestar.org, and you can sign on. The National Center for Charitable Statistics. Some of these will give you basic information. If you want more, you'd have to subscribe to their service. But Form 990s provide foundation size, contact persons, significant personnel, types of projects funded, proposal guidelines and formats, submission deadlines, all this kind of information. A lot of it can be found in this age of information. Other sources of information, reach out to local bank trust officers. Many times bank trust officers are shepherding donor designated foundations that go through their banks. So if you can track down who that person might be, go to your local bank branch and ask them for help. local branch manager can probably connect you with the right people. News publications, other programs, event programs, and donor walls. Found throughout my career that I would wander around and look at the donors who helped fund, whether it was a theater or a not-for-profit organization. Donor walls often provide helpful information as to who likes to support the types of things that you are passionate about. This information on this slide will all be provided in the foundation request forms. But follow directions. That's the important down there towards the bottom. Do not send material not called for. Frequently, if you can't follow directions, your proposal will be round filed and hear from them again, other than the fact that they received it. Challenge grants are an interesting phenomenon lately. Many times people will say, well, I'll give you X amount of dollars if you raise a comparable amount. Doesn't even have to be a comparable amount. Well, if you raise $250,000, we'll match that. That's a matching grant. Or they'll give you a goal. If you hit this amount, we'll give you $100,000. So your part of the challenge grant may be more or maybe less than what the foundation do. But this helps show the foundation the commitment of your board and staff. Contracts, whether they're government or private, they tend to be competitive. Excuse me. They are time limited. They may or may not be renewable. They also may give you a window where you have to use this grant within this 2 or 3 year window, or we will not release the money. Excuse me. Tickle in my throat. So contracts are interesting, but they always come with criteria that you have to live up to, many of which are listed on the slide. Loans. Again, seek advice and input from local banks. There are groups out there that will make loans, but pretty much with bank loans, you know, the old adage is, if you can prove you don't need the loan, they'll give you a loan. And so loans should be considered with caution. And you must show a sustainable business plan that will be able to repay the loan, right? So these criteria that are listed here on the bullet points, you know, debt service, certainly, it was never debt that bothered me, it was debt service. The organization that I worked for had a policy written into their strategic plan that no more than 3 to 5% of any operating funds can be used for debt service. So again, you have to figure out how the rest of the business is going to work. Community Reinvestment Act dollars can also be available. That's a motivation for banks to get involved with a limited number of not-for-profit projects in their community. Banks are required to engage in the development of some not-for-profit charitable activity in the community. And so, again, becoming familiar with your local banker is an extremely important part of the entire process. When it comes to philanthropy, I'm fond of this phrase. If you've ever read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, the people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If you don't want to go out and buy the book, look up on YouTube Simon Sinek's TED Talk. It's entitled Start With Why. It's a 17-minute video, and Every philanthropic donation starts with this issue. People don't buy a car because Ford needs the money. No one donates to a not-for-profit because they need the money. Donors give because an important and critical need that they're passionate about is going to be met by what you're doing. So it stands to reason, again, to repeat, that people don't donate to what you do, they donate to why you are doing it. If there's one aha statement in this presentation that you go away from when you're thinking about philanthropy, that's it. Start with why. They want to know why you're doing it. They need to understand why you're setting up and passionate about your organization. So what is your cause? What is your passion? How will the world be a better place because of your efforts? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? For whom are you going to do it? Or who are you going to serve with your service or product? Before filing for your not-for-profit designation, prepare your business plan. I've repeated it a couple of times, but I can't emphasize this enough. Solid, unduplicated program to address a pressing community need. So you need to have a mission statement that states what you are going to do, not how you're going to do it. The mission statement should be relatively short and express what you intend to do in the community. What are your values? What are your focus areas and goals, objectives, and activities? Defining the services offered to achieve the mission. The planning process is the most important task that a board of directors and the executive director can produce in any organization. The planning of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who you want to serve is so very important. Don't allow your board to skip over the planning process, or at the very least, take it lightly. It's a very important process for you to go through, establishing the mission, the values, focus areas, goals, objectives, and activities of the organization. That's the most important thing, task that your board performs. Research the community. Occasionally I'll work with a client who says, I want to serve women coming out of incarceration. I'll use that as a specific example of a program that somebody had. Well, my task as a mentor was to help connect her with other people who are already doing this in the community. She had no idea. She just knew there was a need there. So if for no other reason than to pick people's brains, you need to know who else has a similar mission and connect with those folks. Collaboration is the engine of innovation, and getting together with people and not trying to do it all your own, is very important. What is your niche going to be? A mission statement is a vision of a preferred future, but it doesn't say how you will achieve it. That may change and that may be in flux throughout your year, but the mission statement is a vision of the preferred future. When it comes to philanthropy and serving people, this highlighted in red, needs, features, and benefits. I actually first heard that phrase out of a Xerox sales training course that a friend of mine was taking back when I lived in Chicago. And all sales is about needs, features, and benefits. And I thought, wow, that applies to not-for-profit organizations and philanthropy as well. There is a need. There are features my organization has that translate into benefits for the community or the individuals. Needs, features, and benefits. It's basic sales. And defining that will help you in your quest for philanthropic support, foundation, and government support, and even people who will maybe buy a membership to your organization. So we need to discover what are the populations, what are the ages, what's my geographic area going to be, income status, problems, needs, what are the needs of your customer base, where will they come from, how are you willing to make contact with them, and determine the qualifications of staff needed to serve the population. If you're trying to deal with young people who don't learn well in a traditional public school setting, and so you're doing an alternative school, you don't want people who aren't familiar with education or don't have a heart for working with troubled teens. So you need to be very specific when you're putting together your enterprise. And develop a 3-year budget. I know you're at the beginning, we're worried about year 1, right? But to have an idea of where you want to go within 3 years is very helpful, and how you intend to grow. You're going to grow your philanthropic support. Are you going to do that? Are you going to start programs, fees for service? If you're doing a literacy program, can you be involved with selling books, maybe as a way to generate revenue in addition to your philanthropy? Define annual expenses, define your sources of income, and where will the money come from? Anyone who's going to get behind your business, your nonprofit organization, is going to want answers to these questions. There are required legal filings. Many of you have probably looked these up already with the Ohio Secretary of State, the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, the Ohio Attorney General. SCORE has resources that we can send you by email, but you can also go online yourself and just look up the Ohio Secretary of State. How do I file for these particular items? And they'll be very helpful with your efforts. As we wind down here, nonprofits are businesses. We have to file an annual tax return with the Internal Revenue Service. Again, the form you use depends on your size, revenue size. This is where it's good to connect with an accountant and an attorney, hopefully as volunteers at the beginning. They can guide you properly. SCORE has other workshops on the fundamentals of writing a business plan. You can develop a complete business plan. Again, we can also send you, SCORE has templates that we can send you related to developing that business plan. And you can also schedule a one-on-one counseling session with a SCORE mentor. There are references you can find in your local library or online. And SCORE workshops are made possible, these free workshops are made possible through the generosity of our funders. You can see a list here. The Akron Community Foundation, the Huntington Akron Foundation, First Energy, KeyBank, the Wealthy Family Foundation, Barberton Community Foundation. Any of these folks have Form 990s. You can find out the other groups that they support, or you can look them up on the website. They're pretty forthcoming, all the good work that they do in the community. And we wouldn't be able to do our work at SCORE without them and the many more funders that make our work possible. Thanks for attending. Again, we talked about making an appointment, but network. Build your contact list in your phone. Every time you meet with somebody, ask if they know of 2 or 3 other people you should be talking to. So building your network is very important. Refer others to SCORE if the topic comes up. And all of us at Akron SCORE wish you success. Were there any questions in the?
Let's see. We have a question. Out of the 100% funds, what percent should be contributed to budget expenses?
Not sure that I understand that question, but your budget is going to contain 100% of your funds. I will use the YMCA as an example. Um, Obviously, I'm familiar with that. So out of 100% of a typical YMCA's operating budget, 40 to 50% of their revenue comes from membership dues, and 20 to 30% from fees for programs like day camp or before and after school, those types of things, or a fitness class. 10%, 10 to 15% might come from government fees and grants, and probably only 10 to 15% comes from contributed support. A good, healthy not-for-profit has far less than 50% of their revenue coming from contributed support. Does that answer that question, you think? So every organization is going to be all of those funds are going to be in your budget. It just depends, the mix changes. But if you've got staff and utilities and occupancy costs, insurance, all those kinds of things are going to make up 100% of your budget. And now your challenge as the leader is to come up with the revenue to cover that expense.
Okay, let's see if she has anything else. There's
So
another.
the budget is simply your plan. It's your plan on how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to bring it in. And that should all add up to 100%.
Okay, so Tamara has a question. Is there a rule as to what services a nonprofit can charge to get revenue?
There's not a rule, but it simply has to match your mission. So I use the example of a let's say an organization has decided they want to raise money doing merchandise sales. The IRS will look at your organization and say, you know, that's unrelated business income tax. The acronym is UBIT, UBIT, unrelated business income tax. So anything that is directly related to living your mission every day is fair game. But you can't be doing things that are unrelated to your mission. There was an organization in Summit County a number of years ago that got in trouble running a food service to help generate revenue to balance their budget. Well, the food service was a stretch to say that it was part of the mission of the organization. And so they were challenged with the concept of unrelated business income tax. Now, there's another phrase that some not-for-profit organizations, and I'll pick on the behemoth, the Cleveland Clinic. So the Cleveland Clinic participates in a program called Pilot. It's payment in lieu of taxes because they want to be good citizens, right? So they take part of their surplus and contribute it to the Cleveland Public Schools, for instance. So what you want to be cognizant of is unrelated business income tax. So as long as you can show that, you know, if you're making widgets and it directly relates to your mission of serving the people you're trying to serve, you know, maybe Goodwill Industries is a good example. So Goodwill Industries employs people who make, you'd be amazed what Goodwill Industries manufactures right in their larger sites. but they're working with people who may be unemployable in other situations. So their work readiness program is producing a product that is sold on the open market, but it's training people to do sustainable work. So there's a balance there. You have to be careful, but as long as you can relate what you're doing to generate revenue with benefiting the overall mission of the organization, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Okay, the other question from D is, if you have a for-profit, can you also have a nonprofit arm?
Yes. That's the easy answer. I work with an organization in East Akron again that sometimes wishes they had started as a for-profit. Hospitals do this all the time. They're big organizations, and so do universities. They're not-for-profits as well, but they may have a fully for-profit subsidiary of the not-for-profit. Just have to meet the criteria for a charitable organization. And if it's not meeting the definition of a charitable organization, then creating a for-profit subsidiary solves the problem of getting in trouble with the IRS. Did that answer that question?
Yes. Next question is, back to the funds. Some nonprofits only spend 10% of the budget to their mission and 90% on budget expenses.
Well, if that was true, I think I'm trying to understand the question. So the whole mission of a valid mission of a not-for-profit is to pay your staff, right? So just because you pay your staff doesn't mean you're a not-for-profit. And you have to pay your staff sometimes competitive wages. As long as you're paying wages that are within the range of other organizations, other similar organizations, the IRS will never question you. So if 60% of your annual operating expense budget is taking care of your employees, that's still part of the charitable mission. So that's still part of your budget. So when you would put together, typically, if you're going to put together your first budget, you decide what your expenses are going to be. Then come over to the income side and say, all right, now how am I going to cover that? And it could be fee for service, it could be foundations and donations, it could be individual donations. Then you figure out where that revenue is going to come from. If you can't come up with a good source of revenues, combination of revenues, then you have to do something about your expense budget. You're either going to have to reduce who you think you're going to hire, or you're going to have to get volunteer service to do your marketing and communications. So it's all 100% of your budget. You decide what your expenses are going to be, then you have to develop a way to cover those expenses. And if you can't, then it's a balancing act. All right, I'm going to have to cut something here and add something here.
She said she got it. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
okay.
anybody else have any more questions? Let's see. I think we answered everything in the chat.
Oh.
Well, it looks like there's no more questions, Doug.
All right. Well, if there are, you can always reach out to the SCORE office, and happy to, one of our many 40-some SCORE volunteers in the Akron office alone, be happy to touch base with you. Thanks, everyone.
I will be sending out the email with the link to the video and also the slides from this. So Thank you again for coming. And go to our website if you want to look up more workshops. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.